Angie Boyd Keck and Ann Baker Furrow both played golf at the University of Tennessee. Both have unique stories. Ann's story predated Title IX and highlighted the need for the legislation. Angie's story took place 20 years after the law was passed. I got a chance to sit down and talk with two Lady Vol trailblazers. So Ann, I want to start with you. Can you just talk about your story here at Tennessee?
Well, actually, I was not involved in Title IX at all with me. In 1962, the SEC passed a ruling that women could play varsity men's sports, no contact. It could be swimming, tennis, and golf. I happened to be the #1 junior in the country that year and got a call from acting athletic director Bowden Wyatt to meet him at Dean Hill Country Club. And I lived in Maryville. I'm from Maryville. And I said, sure, I'll meet you there. And they gave me a full grant and aid to play on the men's golf team.
What was that like, being the only female on that team and having to compete with these guys?
And I did have to compete from the men's tees. I had absolutely no advantage. It was fun. The guys were great to me. It was a wonderful experience, but then 2 years later, the SEC passed a rule saying women could not compete in varsity men's sports. Those of us already involved or on scholarship could stay and do that, and so I had a very, very unique situation. Even though I was the #1 junior golfer in the country, I had very little opportunity to go anywhere. Girls today have absolutely no concept of what it was like back then. You could be the very, very top of your skill and you might get an academic scholarship somewhere. There was very little opportunity for women to compete at a top level, in the collegiate level.
Angie, you are a Tennessee golf alum as well, and you played a critical role in getting this Lady Vol team started. Can you just talk about what you did during that time?
Sure. Well, obviously I'd heard of Ann, being a top junior and top women amateur in the state of Tennessee, and being a Tennessee kid. I had heard of Ann. My dad knew of Ann, so I was really inspired by Ann, because even when I was playing, there wasn't a lot of girls playing high school golf in the state of Tennessee at that point. I played on the boys team a lot if the team we were playing didn't have girls. And from a very young age, the Big Orange Caravan was a golf tournament back then, and it came to all these local golf courses, and they came to my home course, and Doug Dickey and Joan Cronin would come and play in that tournament. And I started, every time I would see them, Coach Dickey, Miss Cronin, when are you going to add women's golf? And Joan would always say, when we can do it the right way, we're going to add women's golf. I didn't know what that meant as a high school teenager. I do know now from a funding standpoint, but that's, Joan tells that story of since I was, this tall, I've been bugging her to add women's golf, and thankfully for me, I was blessed that they did.
And we just discussed it just a minute ago, but you stayed very much involved with Tennessee athletics after your time in college. Can you just talk about why it was important for you to make sure that you were involved in helping get these things started for women's athletics?
Well, I happened to be in another unique position. I was appointed to the Board of Trustees of Tennessee when I was 26 years old. I was the first woman that had that appointment. And as an ex-athlete, I was looked to, and a woman, I was looked to give a little bit of advice and counseling, I guess. And I know I had talked to Joan about adding a women's golf team. That came later, but we really still didn't have much going on until Title IX happened in 1972. But Title IX was a game changer. I have said we'd still be piddle-paddling around probably if it was not for Title IX. It made schools like the UT Knoxville that supported the men so well, it made them legally have to support the women. Okay, what are you going to do? How are you going to set up the department? Most schools just put a senior women's athletic director, and she was under the men's athletic director. And that's the way most schools did. But in 1975, we had to do something. It was time to make a decision of what we were going to do and how we were going to set it up. And as I said, I was on the board then. And they set up a task force for the UT Knoxville campus, something a lot of people probably didn't even know. Men's athletics was under the president. He controlled, they reported to him, the president of the UT system. So where are you going to put the women? Well, this task force was designed or was set up to figure out what do you recommend. The decision really came down to the athletic committee, the trustee committee that was set up for it. And then the decision really came down to Dr. Ed Bowling. But were you going to be separate? Were you going to have a senior women's administrator under the men? Where were they going to be housed? And it came down to Dr. Bowling really wanted to take care of the men's athletics department, take care of the women, give them, and we were one of 6 Division I schools that had 2 departments. A men's athletic department, at this point reporting to the president. Our women's athletic department reported to Howard Almond, Dr. Howard Almond, in student affairs, therefore to the UT chancellor. So we had our own little kingdom over here. We had our own athletic director. Our first budget was $1.2 million, and it came from, this was in 1976, it came from the student activities fee. And for about 10 years, that's where we got our money, was from the student activities fee. And then we had to make a decision where else we were going to get it. But we were so fortunate to be separate. Then we had 2 fabulous ADs, Gloria Ray and Joan Cronin. Then we had we had coaches like Pat Summit and Terry Hull Crawford that won national titles. So we have had a great run in women's athletics because of Title IX, really.
What was it like just seeing how the administrators and the women here just took control of the situation and were like, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to be the best at it?
Well, and that was the goal. I mean, Gloria was a real, fabulous administrator. And so she got us going well. And then we got Joan, who, excellence was always the goal, and to win and to represent women well, to represent women's athletics well. And we just were in a unique place, and it happened. And then the fans, the Vol fans, and I do think the fact that we were called Lady Vols and the fan base bought into that and what it represented, the class, the excellence, the getting an education and all like that. And at one time, I think the name Lady Vol was one of the 5th best recognized athletic brands in the country. People knew what a Lady Vol was.
Angie, and you were able to take part in that first season. So when you were on this team and a part of this, first historic team at Tennessee, what was that like, seeing everything that went into it?
It was a dream come true. Obviously, I was a Lady Vol fan growing up, watching Holly play as a kid, and all the greats that came through. Pat Summit was an icon. I knew of Joan and the excellence and the women's department here and all the women administrators. So when Ann called me to tell me that they were going to start the program, it was a dream come true. I had no idea. I didn't have. It wasn't like they announced that they're going to have a golf program. It was, she called to tell me, and she said, "I'd like you to be a part of it," and it was a dream come true. It was amazing. And I didn't see, obviously I was a student athlete, so I didn't see what went into it. I didn't know what went into it. I heard the stories. Ann's one of the fiercest competitors I've ever seen, and so when she set her mind to fund it, she went out and she was not going to take no for an answer.
I had read in Golf Week that the Las Vegas men's golf team raised $1.5 million for their team. And I said, Joan, we can raise $2 million for our women's golf team. And it took us 2 or 3 years, but we got the team endowed. So that helped. And we set goals. Angie knows what our goals were.
Yeah.
And
it was amazing. It was a dream come true. I had to just pinch myself every day that it was going to, because I was already a sophomore here, and
I've forgotten that.
Yeah, and so it was a dream come true. I thought I was going to be done with my college career before they were going to get this off and running, if they ever would. So it was great.
What else did it mean to you to be one of the few that got a phone call to be a part of that team?
You know, I was astonished because I had, you know, completed my junior golf career. I won the state high school championship, and had continued playing, but not competitively. So it was a huge honor, especially when we formed that team. I think when Joan and Ann went out and hired a coach, they hired the best coach they could have hired to start a program because she was an unbelievable recruiter. It was Linda Franz. She had been in sales and advertising, and she was a heck of a recruiter. And she got Katarina Larson, who was a transfer from Lamar, who turned out to be an All-American and SEC champion. And she
graduated #1 in communications.
Yes, and she absolutely phenomenal player, and also in the classroom. And then Abby Pearson, who is a top junior golfer from South Carolina, and then Shelly Kinder, who was at UNC Wilmington, I think, and she was a Tennessee kid, and then Susan Conger out of Florida. So there was 5 of us. So they put together quite a team that first year, and there's only 5 of us, but Abby went on to be an All-American as well. So pretty unbelievable that our first team had, you know, 2 All-Americans, SEC champion, and numerous All-SEC honors.
And we were in the top 15 within 2 years. That was our goal.
That was the goal. And
top 5 in 5 years.
And honestly, we didn't think anything about it because when you're a Lady Vol, whether it was track, swimming, whatever it was, the standard was excellence. The standard was you're competing for SEC championships, you're competing for NCAA championships. So, you know, they said we're going to be top 15 in 2 years, and we're like, let's go. You know, we didn't think anything about it. We didn't think that's hard. You know, we didn't think anything like that. So, and the first year we finished second at the SEC championship, our very first year, which was just, it was phenomenal. But we didn't, that was all we knew. We didn't, there's no mediocrity.
Well, I'd seen Gloria at that tennis court. She said, if UT ever is interested in being serious about women's sports, you let me know. And then shortly thereafter, we found out we have to be serious. And our timing was such. That was probably, when I talked to her, that was probably 73 or 4. And she was going to Arkansas to coach or do something. So when we said, okay, we're going to have a separate, independent women's athletics director to run our women's athletic department, then Gloria applied for the job. And I remembered her well, and I was on the interview committee, and I can remember exactly where I was sitting on campus and interviewing her. And when she said, and my blood runs orange, then I knew we had the right person. And she was excellent from day one, very competitive, very personable. The people, I mean, we started building a fan base at the very beginning with Gloria. Gloria was here for, again, I'm not sure how many years, 8, 9 years, something like that. And she felt like she needed to move on to something else. And so then we were searching for another women's athletics director. And some of you may know the story that Joan did. We mentioned Joan coached here, the basketball team, while Tom was here getting his doctorate. Then she went to Charleston, where he was at the Citadel. And the first day she walked into the men's athletic she walked into the president's office at the Citadel and said, you need to start a women's athletics department. She walked out of there, and she was the coach of basketball, tennis, and one more, volleyball? I believe it was, anyway, she was the coach of 3 teams when she walked out of his office. From there, she set up, their athletic department became one of the best little women's athletics department in the country by Joan's passion, her charisma, and everything else. So when we were searching for an athletic director to replace Gloria, I was on the search committee on that too. And I went home that night after interviewing her, and I told my husband, I said, that's the one, that's who we want, she'll do it. And you know, we have just been blessed to have her here this long, because she was so well respected nationally, men and women. But she just knew how competitive, do it with class, you know, do it well, excellence all the way, and we were blessed by that.
Tennessee Athletics is grateful to Angie Boyd Keck and Ann Furrow for sharing their inspiring stories. Stay tuned for more coverage as we pay tribute to Title IX.